The ones we fail to notice sometimes have the biggest weight. It was meant to be just another day. Emily picked up the pace on the rain-drenched pavement, her thoughts mingling with concern over her to-do queue as her mind drifted. That's when she saw him. One dog, curled up against the cold brick wall of an abandoned gas station. His fur was grimy and matted. His body shook with exhaustion. It produced a few people who stopped for him, but most simply walked on, glancing away, seeing him as just one more stray, another unseen life that had become nothing in the streets. But Emily couldn't look away. His eyes carried something haunting in them, such a profound sadness that it echoed right through the din of the busy city and went straight to her heart. She froze, looking at him, like time stood still. "Where did you come from?" she muttered almost to herself, drawing closer. The dog didn't move. He just watched her, tired amber eyes filled with longing, but too broken to hope. Emily dropped to one knee, reaching carefully into her bag. She took out an old protein bar, unwrapped it, and broke off a piece. She set it lightly down on the ground. The dog looked at the food, his body paralyzed, seconds stretched into hours. He then slowly leaned in, sniffing it and taking a tentative bite. Emily smiled faintly. "That's it, boy. Take it easy." But then she saw it. A worn, tattered collar lost under layers of filth and matted hair. Her heart skipped a beat. He wasn't just a stray. Crusty paws extended, pushing aside the knots to expose a rusty metal tag. Emily narrowed her eyes in the little light, slowly tracing over the nearly invisible engraving with her fingers. Max. The name hit her like a body blow. This dog had a name. He belonged to someone. Soon enough, Emily called her aged tag number. As the line rang, her heart thudded in her ears. Once, twice, then, "This number is not in service." Emily took a sharp breath, anger and sadness boiling from within. Who was Max? How had he come to be here, alone and forgotten? Her mind whirled with possibilities, none of them reassuring. Just then she looked down. Max was gazing up into her eyes, as though he'd found the keeper of the golden light. In that moment, Emily made a choice that would alter both of their lives forever. "You are not staying here, Max," she whispered, taking her coat and covering his frail frame. "Let's go home." Finally, Max let out a deep, tired breath and laid his head on her chest, a gesture of trust, of surrender. Emily rose, cradling him, unmindful of the frigid wind lashing about them. She had no idea what she was walking into, but there was one thing they both knew. Max's story was far from over. There are times when the past comes back to haunt us in the most surprising of forms. Beyond the rhythmic ticking of the old wall clock and Max's soft breathing, as he curled up on the floor in a makeshift bed of blankets, Emily's apartment was silent. She watched him as the questions raced through her mind. How long had he been out there? Who had left him behind? And most pressingly, what had become of the person who once cared enough to give him a name? Desperate for answers, Emily took a deep breath and picked up Max's rusted tag again, her fingers brushing over the now faded engraving. She entered the faded number into an internet search, hoping for a miracle. "Come on, let something get here," she said under her breath. Repeatedly trying, an old social media account came up. It had belonged to a woman named Claire Reynolds, a name that sent a shiver down Emily's spine. The most recent post on the account was almost 3 years old, a photo of a younger, healthier Max, lying in a sun-drenched backyard with the caption, "My boy, Max. Forever my sunshine." Emily's throat tightened. So much for forever. The comments on the post were filled with well wishes and heart emojis, but one drew attention. It was from Claire herself, answering a friend. "I don't know what I'd do without him. He's my everything." Emily swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. What is the story between then and now? Why had Max found himself abandoned and alone? She needed answers, and Claire was the only one with them to give. Emily clicked on Claire's profile without hesitation, but what she found was not at all what she had expected. No new updates, no pictures, just silence. Then, buried deep in the profile's bio section, an address. "Seems like we're going for a ride, Max," Emily whispered, looking at her sleeping dog. "I hope you're prepared for what we find." The following day, Emily packed a few clothes and a toothbrush and settled Max into the passenger seat. Driving through the still streets, images of discovering him curled into the cold, ensuring herself played on loop in her mind. Max sat up, alert, looking out the window as the world whizzed past, and I felt he took it all in. A few hours later, they showed up at the address from Claire's profile. It was a tiny little house, tired and gray with grass that grew up around the fence and paint that flaked off like dead skin. After a moment, Emily hesitated. Was this a mistake? Would Claire even be here? She took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Long moments passed, and she had all but given up that anyone would answer when the door slowly creaked open. A woman with sunken eyes, an exhaustion and a sadness that resonated too well familiar. "Can I help you?" Claire's voice was quiet, uncertain. Emily looked down at Max, who had perked up when he saw the woman. His tail twitched just a bit. "I think I've found something that belongs to you," Emily said, her voice shaking. Claire's eyes grew wide and tears sprang up immediately. She sank down to my level, extended a trembling hand. "Max? Oh my God! Max!" Max didn't hesitate. He stepped further toward her and leaned his head on her hand as though he'd been waiting for this moment of connection all his life. Claire's knees went down, and she folded onto the porch, gathering Max tight. Tears streamed down her face. Anime was cutesy and pure bliss, such a direct echo of her life, and yet Claire still struggled to relax. Like she was missing something. "I thought I lost him for good," Claire cried, her fingers scratching Max's fur. He became lost after my husband died. I looked everywhere, and I could not find him. I thought he died out there, alone." Claire's words broke Emily's heart. "I found him outside an old gas station," she said softly. "He was frightened, starving, but he never lost hope." Claire held Max close, murmuring soft reassurances into his coat. "I never lost hope," she said weakly. "I just didn't know where else to look anymore." Emily smiled softly. "Well, now he's home." As the sun turned toward the horizon, Claire welcomed Emily inside for tea. The tiny house was filled with memories, pictures of Max, her husband, happier days. Even though it was clear he had been well loved at one time, but was none the worse for wear, and Emily knew he was where he belonged. Claire looked at Emily, tears in her eyes, gratitude in her gaze. "Thank you for not leaving just like everyone else." Emily smiled and wiped away a tear on her cheek. "I guess Max saved me too, in his own way." The peace turned to Emily as she observed Max snuggling up with Claire. Some tales end happily, even the ones that start in the darkest of places. The past never really leaves us. It hides in the places we least suspect waiting to be discovered. Emily was in Claire's living room, a whiff of chamomile tea permeating the air, and heaviness of head, Max lay at Claire's feet where he breathed slow and steady, his finally peace. Emily took a sip of her tea as she watched Claire's fingertips absent-mindedly stroke Max's fur, lost in memories that were an even deeper pain to put into words. There was a long silence before finally Claire looked up, her eyes still shining with tears that were not falling. "It seems a world and a lifetime ago," she said softly, looking at a framed photograph of Max next to her late husband. "After Tom died, Max was the only thing that got me out of bed. He was my rock until the night he vanished." Emily leaned forward, feeling the gravity of the story they were about to hear. "What happened that night, Claire?" Claire sucked in a shaky breath, her fingers quaking around the teacup. It was late. A storm was rolling in, and Max was fidgety. I let him out into the yard, as I always did. Only this time, he never returned. Her voice cracked. I searched everywhere. I made posters, called shelters, nothing. A period of months later, I had to accept that he was gone. Emily swallowed hard, feeling a lump in her throat. She could so easily picture Claire's heartbreak. "I discovered him by the old gas station," she said gently. "Do you think he was trying to find his way back to you all this time?" Claire brushed away a tear that fell down her cheek and nodded. "I believe he was. He used to go there with Tom every weekend. They'd park outside the gas station and eat a sandwich. It was their special spot." Her voice faltered in a quiet sob. He had to have been searching for him. A bolt of inspiration hit Emily. "Claire, did Tom have any family relative? Anyone who may have been interested in Max post-mortem?" Claire's brows furrowed. "Tom had a brother, but after the funeral we lost touch. He never liked dogs much." She shook her head. "I don't imagine him wanting Max." Emily's curiosity deepened. There was something odd about Max's disappearance. "Do you mind if I investigate? Perhaps there's something we've overlooked." Claire paused for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I just want to know the truth, Emily. I owe Max that much." Back home, Emily sat in front of her laptop, scrolling through old news archives and social media pages. She discovered an obituary for Tom with numerous condolences, but one struck her. "Some bonds are stronger than death," read a message from an anonymous account. "Dogs never forget." Emily's heart pounded. There was no profile picture, no posts, just those chilling words. She quickly looked up the account's activity, which originated from a small town kilometers away. A creeping queasiness came over her. Could someone have taken him on purpose, or was everything a tragic accident? Emily went back to the gas station the next day where she had found Max. She paces along the perimeter, hoping to notice something she'd missed. Then, standing at the rusty fence, her eyes caught sight of an old man sitting against a bench nearby. "Looking for something, miss?" he said, his voice rough but friendly. Emily paused before nodding. 3 days ago, I found a dog, a German Shepherd here. Do you remember seeing him?" The man's eyes softened as he recognized. "That old boy? Yeah, I had seen him around for months. Kept returning, like he was waiting for someone. Broke my heart to see him sitting every day here, waiting down the road like he expected somebody to show up." A shiver ran down Emily's spine. "Did you ever see anybody with him?" The man stroked his chin pensively. "Once. A guy in a dark coat came in. He tried to make the dog follow him, but it wouldn't move. Just sat there waiting." He shook his head. "Dogs are loyal like that." Emily's mind spun with possibilities. Who was the man in the dark, long coat? And what was it that made Max turn down? Emily knelt next to Max that evening, stroking his fur as he lay on the floor. "We're going to work this out, buddy. No more waiting alone." Max bumped her hand, his eyes dancing with trust and appreciation. In that moment, Emily had the most purpose she had ever felt in her life. We do not know how to do something we are afraid to do. Emily sat at her kitchen table, a message on her laptop, the anonymous missive she had stumbled upon earlier, open in front of her. Some bonds are stronger than death. Dogs never forget. The words played in her head, eating at her curiosity. Who had written it? And more important, what did they know about Max's disappearance? Therefore, she retraced her steps, re-exploring every detail from previous days to make sure the truth would find her. The one that most sticks in my memory is the encounter with the elderly man at the gas station. A man in a dark coat. She muttered under her breath. Who was he, and why was he trying to take Max? Emily grabbed her phone and called Claire. "Hey, Claire. I have a hunch Max didn't simply wander off in error. There may be someone who knows more about what happened." Claire's voice quivered with anxiety. "What do you mean?" "So, you mean someone took him?" Emily paused, not wanting to scare her too much. "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." That evening, Emily returned to the gas station. The old man was there again, drinking coffee from a dented thermos. She cautiously walked up to him. "Sir, you said you saw a man attempting to take Max. Can you think of anything more? Anything at all?" The old man squinted with thoughts clouding his faded eyes. "Well, he did not come from these parts, that's for sure. Kept glancing over his shoulder like he didn't want to be seen. Dark coat, hat pulled low. Couldn't see his face much, but..." He paused, hitting his cane against the ground. "He fled in an old blue pickup truck, had a dent in the side." Emily's pulse quickened. "A lead. Did you see where he went?" The old man nodded, headed toward the outskirts, near the old industrial park. Not much around these days. Emily wasted no time. She climbed into her car, heading for the industrial park. It was a dark road, flanked by giant, desolate warehouses. Her headlights cut through the fog, exposing broken windows and rusty fences. The stillness was oppressive, almost suffocating. She slowed down when she saw a blue pickup truck parked beside an old storage building. Her chest pounded with heartbeats. Could this be the same truck? She took a long breath, pulled over, and reached out carefully. It was a soft, scrabbling sound coming from inside. As she crept closer, Emily peered through a shattered window. Her throat caught on her breath. Within stood a shadowy figure rummaging through old boxes. And there, next to him, was an empty dog crate. Max's crate. Emily's hands shook as she picked up her phone. As she was calling the police, he turned around. Their eyes met, and for a moment, fear froze her in place. "Hey," she called out, her voice braver than it felt. "Who are you? What do you want with Max?" The man hesitated, then ran toward the back exit. Emily didn't think. She ran after him. He brought her through the wide aisles of the empty warehouse, her footsteps echoing behind him. Her breath caught as he caught sight of her, and, reversing the steps he had it fading away into the dark, the room flooded with the sudden air of frustration that came to him. Gasping, she pressed herself against the wall as thoughts raced. Who was he? And why had he been storing an empty crate here? And, more importantly, what had he wanted with Max? Fear began to take hold of her, but through it she felt defiance. She wouldn't give up, not now. Max had been waiting too long for answers. She took out her phone and called Claire. "Claire, I think I've got something. Max's story is deeper than we thought." Claire's voice trembled. "Just be careful, Emily. Max needs you." Emily inhaled deeply, peering into the inky blackness before her. "I can guarantee you, I will not stop until we get the truth. Sometimes you just need to dig a little deeper to uncover buried truths." Emily parked outside and stared at the empty warehouse. His shadow was now lost to the darkness, but all the questions remained. Burdensome, disquieting. Who was he? And why had he been hanging around Max's old crate? She tapped her fingers nervously on the steering wheel. She needed answers. Finally, she took a deep breath and called in reinforcements. She dialed Amanda's number and let the line ring. "Emily, it's late. What's going on?" Amanda groggily replied on the other end. "I believe I discovered something, or someone." "It was about Max," Emily said, her voice shaking. "Can you come to the old industrial park? I need a fresh perspective on this." Amanda paused, then sighed. "Give me 15 minutes. Don't do anything crazy." As they waited, Emily tentatively approached the abandoned crate. It was dusty around the edges, but on the inside were the faded remnants of fur. Max's fur. She bent down to inspect the small tuft and held it up to the low overhead light. Her heart clenched. How long had he been held here? And for what purpose? Headlights suddenly appeared in the distance. Emily glanced to see Amanda arriving, getting out and moving toward her with purpose. "All right, out with it," Amanda said, arms crossed. Emily briefed her on all of it: the man in the dark coat, the elderly man's description, the empty crate. Amanda frowned. "This sounds off. Maybe Max was sold, or worse." Emily swallowed hard. "I've got to find out who that man is." Amanda nodded. "Then let's begin with checking surveillance cameras around here. There may be something good in there." They eventually found a small gas station on the opposite side of the street, with a security camera pointing in the direction of the warehouse. Emily talked to the clerk, who begrudgingly agreed to let them review the footage. Their eyes grew wide as they watched the grainy footage. There he was, the man in the dark coat. He crept, glancing around before trying to coax Max into the crate. But Max fought it, pulling away each time. "He didn't want to go with him," Emily whispered. Amanda leaned closer. "Wait, zoom in. That license plate. Can you read it?" Emily's heart raced, and she squinted. "Bingo, I got it." Amanda did a quick search by the license plate number in a public records database. They quickly had a name: Daniel Grayson. Emily's stomach churned. Who is he? Amanda brought up an article on her phone. Apparently, he was running an illegal dog breeding operation, stopped a few years ago, but maybe he still does it. Emily's hands contracted into fists. If it's him who took Max, he's not getting away with it. Just as they were about to go, Emily's phone buzzed. It was Claire. "Emily, I think someone's watching my house." Claire's voice trembled. Emily's heart skipped a beat. "We're on our way. Keep inside and don't answer anyone at the door." She turned to Amanda, her eyes filled with resolve. "Now, this has become much bigger than we realized. The past has a tendency to come back, and especially if you're running from it." Emily's hands were gripping the steering wheel tightly as she and Amanda raced toward Claire's house. The streets streamed by, but Emily's mind returned only to Claire's trembling voice on the phone. "Someone's monitoring my house." The words played through her mind and propelled every movement with urgency. "We have to be careful," Amanda said, looking over at Emily. "But if this guy is who we think he is, we can't afford to fuck up." Emily nodded, her jaw set. "We're not going to let anything happen to Claire or Max." As they drove up to Claire's house, the streetlights dimmed and brightened in ominous pulses. Emily's eyes swept the perimeter, looking for anything amiss. Claire was standing there, pale with worry, by the door. She led them in and locked the door behind them. "He was here," Claire said, eyes racing toward the window. "I saw someone watching on the tree. When I looked again, he had vanished." Emily shared a glance with Amanda. "Did you recognize him?" Claire shook her head. "It was too dark, but I can tell when I'm being monitored." Max, feeling the tension in the air, pressed his head to Claire's leg, his ears suddenly erect and at attention. Emily knelt by his side and gently stroked his soft fur. "It's okay, boy. We're here now." Emily turned to Amanda. "Well, we need to locate this Daniel Grayson. If he's back in town and keeping an eye on Claire, he's doing something." Amanda took out her phone and started scrolling through the records they had collected earlier. "There's an old address on file for him, about 15 minutes from here. Abandoned property. If he's in hiding, that could be where he is." Claire's eyes widened with fear. "You're not actually considering going there, are you?" Emily smiled comfortingly at her. "We just have to see what it is. Let's see what we can find that ties him to Max." Claire faltered and then nodded. "Just be careful, please." Emily and Amanda drove along the dark, winding coffee roads that led to the address. The air got thicker the nearer they came. An unsettling silence descended around them. When they finally got there, it looked exactly like what they'd imagined. Derelict, broken windows and weeds taking back the ground. There was a single low light glowing from within. "Looks like somebody's home," Amanda whispered. Emily sucked in a breath, her heart racing. "Let's find out." They got out of the car and cautiously walked toward the building. As they neared the door, it creaked open slightly as if beckoning them in, and Emily looked at Amanda, who nodded, and they stepped in together. Inside, the air was stale with dust and decay. Stacks of old newspapers covered the floor, and cages, empty, rusted cages, lined the walls. Amanda shuddered. "I felt eerie feelings in this place." Emily noticed something in the corner, a familiar collar half buried beneath the rubble. She picked it up, her breath becoming trapped in her throat. Max's collar. He was here. At that moment, a floorboard creaked behind them. They turned around, but the room was empty, or so it seemed. "We need to get out of here," Amanda whispered. "Now." Emily shoved the collar into her pocket and they hurried back outside. But as they approached the car, headlights suddenly came on in the distance down the road. A vehicle was heading directly toward them. "Get in!" Emily yelled, scrambling for the keys. They leapt into the car just as the truck screeched to a halt a couple of yards away. A man's dark-coated silhouette was next to it, watching them in a menacing, statue-like stillness. "Drive!" Amanda urged. Emily didn't hesitate. As they sped away, tires screeched against the pavement. The truck, a monstrous figure in the rear view for what seemed like several agonizing seconds before it slunk into the darkness. Mouth dry, Emily struggled to breathe. "We're in deep now, Amanda." Amanda nodded grimly. "And we are not going to stop until we get at the truth. The truth always finds a way to be revealed, sometimes in the most unexpected ways." They were both sitting in a car, breathing heavily, their hearts racing from the close call of the escape. The headlights of the truck that had chased them were far behind, but the fear remained. Emily tightened her grip on the steering wheel, knuckles white. "We have got to take this to the police," she said firmly. Amanda hesitated. "Do you think they'll believe us? I mean, all we got is an old collar and some shady guy on our tail." Emily sighed. "Amanda, we don't have a choice. Claire is in trouble, and Max, he's gone through enough." The fluorescent lights flickered ominously as they walked into the police station, which they had driven straight to. The officer at the desk, a middle-aged man with weary eyes, eyed him skeptically. "Can I help you?" Emily moved up and put Max's collar on the counter. "We've got information on a possible illegal dog operation and a guy who's been tailing us." The officer looked them up and down for a moment and then sighed and waved them to sit. "Start from the beginning." Emily told him everything. About finding Max at the gas station, about the chase from earlier that evening. She made out the officer's brows knitting together in concern. When she was done, he sat back in his chair and nodded. "We've gotten reports of a man matching your description loitering around the abandoned properties, but nothing concrete enough to go on, until now." Amanda leaned forward. "So, you'll do something?" The officer nodded. "We'll look into it. But until then, you should take precautions, the two of you. The bet of the snoopers. These kinds of people are not fond of snoopers." They left the station, and with it, Emily felt a relief, but also fear. "At least we're being taken seriously," she said, climbing into the driver's seat. Amanda exhaled. "Yeah, but I can't help thinking that we're not out of the woods yet." They went to Claire's house to find her on the porch with Max next to her. The dog perked up when he caught sight of Emily, his tail patting against the blanket spread on the floor. Claire rose, worry written all over her face. "Did you find anything?" Emily squatted, smoothed a hand over Max's fur. "We were like, let's drop the collar to the police. They're looking into it now. But Claire, we must be vigilant. That man is not going to yield easily." Claire swallowed, cast her eyes down at Max. "I won't allow him to take you again," she said softly. That night, as Emily and Amanda got ready to leave, they heard a noise outside. A flash passed by the front window, and Max growled low in his throat. Emily's heart pounded. Amanda reached for her phone. "Should we call the police?" Claire cradled Max against her, her eyes round with fear. "Perhaps it's just the wind," she said, but her voice didn't quite support the notion. Emily shook her head. "We're not going to take any chances, though." She tiptoed to the door and looked out. The yard was hollow, but the anxious feeling stayed. "Lock the doors. Keep Max close," she told Claire. "We'll be close by, just in case." Their brains ran wild when Emily and Amanda drove off. "This is no longer about Max," Amanda told me. "There's something larger happening there. We need to find out what." Emily placed her chin in both hands, eyes aglaze with iron resolve. "And we will, no matter what it takes." Sometimes the most dangerous threats are the ones hiding in the shadows. Emily's knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel, she and Amanda drove in silence through the darkened streets. The burden of their discoveries weighed heavy upon them, like an unseen force. The shadowy figure lurking in front of Claire's house, the mysterious man with the warehouse, and the strange feeling of being watched. They were all part of something much deeper than any of them realized. "We need to know who this guy is," Amanda said, finally cutting through the silence, "and why Max matters so much to him." Emily nodded, keeping her eyes on the road. "I feel like getting closer, too close." The two women sat in Amanda's apartment, relieved to have gotten off the road but still bogged down by the gravity of their chase. Emily sat down at the kitchen table, pulling out her laptop and the files they had on each other. Everything from photos of Max to documents on Daniel Grayson and other miscellaneous info covering the screen. "If he's watching Claire, then he must think we know something," Emily murmured. "Or he's searching for something we haven't discovered yet." Amanda stooped behind her shoulder. "Then we better get to it before he does." They assembled scraps of data for the next few hours. Emily sifted through online databases and Amanda dove into antique newspapers. Then Amanda gasped, pointing at a news article dated 5 years earlier. Local man arrested for illegal dog breeding operation. More than 50 dogs rescued. The accompanying photograph was of a familiar face. The man in the dark coat. "That's him," Emily whispered. "Daniel Grayson. He must be attempting to reboot. Perhaps Max had been in all this from the beginning." Amanda's jaw tightened. "If he's returned back in business, we need to stop him before that's too late." The following day, Emily and Amanda went back to Claire's house with a plan. "We're going to install security cameras at your property," Emily explained. "If he comes back, we'll have evidence." Claire hesitated, fear written deep in her face. What if he takes Max again? Emily got down on her knees and put a reassuring hand on Max's head. "We won't let that happen." Amanda positioned the cameras while Emily walked the yard perimeter, searching for any signs of tampering. "I saw very faint footprints by the side fence and I was palm on chest, heart racing," she said. "He's been here," she said under her breath. That night, Emily and Amanda spent the night with Claire and watched the security footage live on their phones. Hours of tense silence passed until shortly after midnight, when a shadow passed across the yard. "There," Amanda whispered urgently. Emily felt the blood drain from her face at the sight of the figure standing by the fence watching, the man in the dark coat. Claire gasped. "What do we do?" Emily didn't hesitate. "Call the police. Now." But just as Claire held up her phone, ready to dial, Max emitted a low, rumbling growl that pierced the silence. The shadow stopped, hesitating, took a step back and vanished into the dark. The police arrived minutes later, but the man had vanished. Emily played them the footage, a hint of frustration in her voice. "He's stalking her. We have to do something." The officer nodded. "We're going to step up patrols around the area, but be careful. People like this are not easily defeated." Once they departed, Claire collapsed on the couch, visibly shaken. Emily sat beside her. "We will get through this, Claire. Max is safe, and we will ensure that he remains safe." Amanda nodded, looking fierce as she stared hard at the slimy cockroaches. "We're not letting him win. To catch a predator, you have to think like one." Emily was pacing in Claire's living room, the air so thick with tension it could have been sliced with a knife. Max was near Claire's feet in the doorway, thinking of all the people coming and going. What they'd escaped the night before had rattled them all, but it had also steeled their resolve. It was time to take action. "We need to pull him out," Emily said, with an intense gaze toward Amanda. "If we can catch him doing it, we can put a stop to this forever." Amanda nodded. "I was saying the same thing. We put up the cameras, but we need something else, something that will make him act." Claire hugged Max tightly. "I just want this nightmare to end." Emily and Amanda then set their plan in motion that afternoon. They scattered additional cameras, making sure every inch of Claire's property was covered. Next, they set up a situation that would provide a rationale for the man to approach. "We'll take Max for a walk and prop open the front door, just wide enough for him to wiggle through," Emily explained. "If he's been watching, he'll see a window." Claire hesitated. "What if he gets inside?" Amanda reassured her. "We'll be sitting in the car, ready to call the police as soon as he walks in." With Georges sounding the alarm, they let Max out on a walk, with the front door ajar. They walked in a circle around the block, back to the car down the street when the car got back, eyes fixed on the house through their phone screens, watching the live stream. Time dragged on. Every minute stretched into forever. They watched the empty doorway, and the tension grew unbearable. The flicker of movement on the screen made Emily's breath catch. An ominous figure slinked out of the shadows, making its way toward the house. The man in the dark coat. Amanda clutched her phone more tightly. "He's going in." Emily picked up her phone, her voice sure and strong, calling the police now. They listened in silence as the man edged in. Max could hardly take the Rattlebox station wagon and had got behind the wheel as he moved through the front of his cup. Claire gripped his leash comfortingly. "It's okay, boy." Just minutes later, blue lights flashed down the street. The officers acted urgently to surround the house. Emily and Amanda leapt from the car and rushed the officers as they entered the house. A shout came from inside. "Hands up!" Holding her breath, Emily watched as 2 other officers led the man out in cuffs. His dark eyes flashed over hers for a split second, and she felt a chill down her spine. "You have no idea what you've done," he stage whispered, but the officer sped him out of there. Claire was standing on the porch, crying tears of relief. "It's over, isn't it?" Emily slid an arm around her. "Almost." Now that the man was in custody, Emily and Amanda met with the police to review the evidence they had found. The officers, who was now confirmed as members of the USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, assured the callers that really, the man who had just walked away was named Daniel Grayson, and he would be seriously charged in this clear case of tortoise abuse. "You two are finally what we needed to keep him off the streets for good," the officer said. "You did the right thing." Claire smiled weakly. "I just want Max to be safe." Just as they were walking home, Claire bent down next to Max as they passed a tree and held on to him. "You're safe now, buddy. We did it." Max sighed lightly and nuzzled into her. Emily and Amanda shared a relieved glance, realizing they had stood up for that which was worth saving. Emily let out a breath, staring up at the starry sky. Sometime, the hardest battle ends up being your biggest victory. Wounds do heal, but the scars remain as a reminder of the battles we've fought. The morning after Daniel Grayson's arrest, Claire stood on her porch, gazing at the gentle light of dawn. For the first time in what felt like forever, she could breathe without the lead of fear pinning her to the ground. Max lay next to her, resting his head on her lap, his eyes clamped shut in bliss. Emily and Amanda showed up a little while later with coffee and pastries. Claire waved at them with a weary but honest smile. "I slept through the night for the first time in weeks," she said. "Thank you, both of you." Emily poured herself a cup and sat next to her. "Figuring it out. I'm grateful that you helped me, but you don't have to thank us, Claire. We did this together." Amanda grinned. "Oh, and also, Max here is a bloody good reason to fight." Max wagged his tail softly and lifted his head to nuzzle Claire's hand. For the first time in forever, she laughed, an honest-to-God, full-throttle laugh. Throughout the day, Emily and Amanda assisted Claire in cleaning the house, attempting to remove the remnants from the past few terrible days. The cameras remained up for now, a precaution everyone had agreed upon. Emily took out her phone and pulled up an email she said she had received from the police department. They said that Grayson had been running a small ring, trying to sell stolen dogs using false adoption names. They believe Max was supposed to be in it. Claire's face darkened. Poor Max. I can't believe how close I came to losing him again. Amanda rested a hand on her shoulder. But you didn't. You fought for him. And now he's home. Claire nodded, wiping away an errant tear. Home. I like the sound of that. Later that afternoon, Emily suggested taking Max for a walk in the park. Something normal, something familiar. The afternoon was quiet, and as I walked along these paths, the atmosphere was lighter, filled with the rustling of leaves and the sounds of laughter from afar. Max trotted in front of me, ears forward, tail wagging. Watching him, Claire found a flicker of hope. "He's happy again," she whispered. Emily smiled. "And so are you." Sitting on a park bench, Claire turned to her friends. "I don't know what I would have done without you two. You didn't have to live here, but you did." Amanda shrugged. "That's what friends do." Emily chuckled. "Anyway, I think Max would have found us if we didn't." Claire chuckled, scratching Max's fur. "I guess you two are stuck with me now." As the sun sank lower, Claire gazed at Emily and Amanda with fresh appreciation. "I used to think strength was about holding things on my own, but I've learned over the years, sometimes it takes real strength to know when to ask for help." Emily nodded, and when to trust those who wish to help. Max had lifted his head and gave a happy bark as if in agreement. The three women laughed. This moment a new chapter for each of them. Healing is not simply moving on. It's about the process of learning to trust again. The days after Daniel Grayson's arrest went slow but sure. Claire started to get into a new rhythm, one that didn't involve checking over her shoulder every 5 minutes. Max was getting comfortable too, the wariness leaving his eyes and being replaced with the feeling of safety that he had so desperately craved. Emily and Amanda kept coming over, helping Claire feel a little more normal. One morning, Amanda said, stirring her coffee at Claire's kitchen table, "We should do something fun today. Want to go to the beach?" Claire hesitated, casting a glance at Max, contentedly sprawled next to the back door and watching the birds. "I don't know if I am ready to leave the house yet." Emily smiled gently. "Baby steps, Claire. We can take baby steps, even an hour will help you through it." Claire inhaled, thought about it. "Okay, let's do it." The beach was more quiet than expected, the waves gently lapping the shore. Claire strolled slowly along the sand, Max trotting next to her, sniffing the ground and the air, tasting the salt and seaweed. "It feels like nice," Claire said, the knot between her shoulders loosening. "I can't believe I let fear trap me for so long." Amanda grinned. "You've endured quite a lot, Claire. It's okay to take your time." Further along the shore, Claire watched a family playing with their dog, a young golden retriever bounding joyfully through the shallow waves. Max looked on but stayed beside Claire, his loyalty unshaken. Emily jabbed Claire in the arm. "He's so attached to you, I think he knows you rescued him." Claire crouched down and hugged Max around the neck. "He saved me too," she whispered. When the sun sank lower in the sky, they cleaned up their stuff and returned to Claire's house. As they turned into the driveway, Claire's heart raced when she noticed something on the front porch, a small, crumpled piece of paper shoved under the welcome mat. She shot Emily a nervous look before gingerly picking it up and unfolding it. Those words made her spine shiver. "You think it's done, but it's not." Amanda's face darkened. "We need to call the police." Claire swallowed hard, hands shaking. "I thought he was in custody. How is this happening?" Emily laid a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure it out. You're not alone, Claire." Claire straightened her shoulders, despite the fear gripping her. "I'm done being afraid. Whatever this is, it isn't going to run my life again." Emily nodded. "We'll fight this together." Amanda took out her phone and called the police. "It's time to stop this, and stop him once and for all." Max emitted a low growl, standing guard next to Claire. She patted his fur, gaining courage from the steady loyalty she could see in his eyes. Fear only has power when you allow it to take you over. Claire stared at the crumpled note in her hand, as if holding it over a flame would make it disappear. It was like a wraith playing the what about. game. You think it's over, but it's not. However, there was a cold shiver in her spine, although the afternoon sun heated all the windows. Emily paced next to her, a deep furrow in her brow. I don't get it. We saw Grayson get arrested. Who else would want to do this? Amanda folded her arms, her voice calm but resolute. Maybe he's not doing it all by himself. Someone else might be watching us. Claire swallowed, looking at Max. Her loyal dog waited at her side, ears forward, eyes on the door, as if he could be taught to see the phantom menace hovering outside. She took a deep breath. We can't continue to live like this. We need to take control. Hell-bent on confronting the unknown directly, Claire took out her phone and called the detective handling Grayson's case. Detective Harris, it's Claire. I believe someone else is involved. I found a note on my porch. It was the detective, who sounded calm but concerned. Stay inside, lock your doors, and I'll send someone over. Do you have any idea who might have left it in the meantime? Claire looked at Emily and Amanda, shaking her head. No, but I've got a hunch we're being watched. We'll look into it. Harris responded, Stay vigilant. Immediately after hanging up, Amanda took out a notepad. Let's outline everything we do know. Perhaps there was something we didn't catch. Emily nodded. We have footage from the night in question. Let's check it again. They sat in front of the laptop, scrolling through hours of footage. The images flashed across the screen. Deserted street, swaying trees, then, wait, stop. Claire pointed at the screen. A half-shadowy, half-hidden figure outside the fence moved. It wasn't Grayson. The figure was smaller, leaner. Amanda leaned in closer. That's not him? Somebody else. Emily exhaled. So he's not working alone. Somebody's picking up where he left off. Claire clenched her fists. We must stop them before they take Max again. So sick of the nightmare, Claire took matters into her own hands, once and for all. Accompanied by Max, she walked outside to inspect the property, while her friends kept a watchful eye from the porch. When she got to the edge of the yard, a rustling noise drew her attention. Her heart raced, but she held her ground. Who's there? Silence. Then a shadow flitted behind the trees. Claire didn't back down. You can't scare me anymore. Amanda and Emily ran to her, eyes scouring the dark. A figure they had not seen before stepped forward, eyes cold, calculating. I think you should get the hell out, the man said, his voice low and menacing. Emily stepped forward. We're not going anywhere. The police are on their way. The man grinned and receded into the dark. This isn't over. As the police appeared, Claire breathed deeply, aware she was not the same frightened woman from weeks earlier. But she was so much stronger now. Stronger because of Max. Stronger because of Emily and Amanda. Stronger because she wasn't going to be afraid anymore. Detective Harris walked over to her. We will, Claire, find out who he is. Just hang in there. She nodded, something new in her voice. I'm not backing down. Emily squeezed her hand. And you will not be alone doing it. Max gave a quiet bark, as if in agreement. And so one door closes, another opens. Days went by, and with the sun, Claire grew more radiant. The police had traced the man hanging about her house, an old prison buddy of Daniel Grayson's, seeking to get back what he lost. But thanks to evidence Emily and Amanda had collected, both men were in prison. On her porch, with Max at her side, Claire inhaled the burn of the crisp morning air. The heavy package that had dug into her chest was gone. Max wagged his tail as she gazed at him, feeling her peace emanate through her. Emily and Amanda arrived at the house. Relief and pride shone on their faces. So, what now? Amanda asked playfully. Claire smiled, rubbing Max's ears. Now, we move forward. Emily nodded. "You've come so far, Claire. Max is lucky to have you." Claire threw her arms around both of them, overwhelmed with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without all your support and love." As they walked toward the park for Max's favorite game of fetch, Claire looked back at the house that had always reminded her of a prison. Now it was a home, filled with hope, healing, and second chances. Max barked joyfully, running ahead, and Claire followed for the first time in many years, without fear.